Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, not always told how to voice radio, so today I'm going to attempt to show you how to play the Pokémon trading card game. Maybe you're new to the game, maybe you like Pokémon Go and want to try the Pokémon trading card game, or maybe you're my fiance who still doesn't know how to play. Either way, I'm going to attempt to show you in this and maybe one other video all the basics and everything you need to get out there and play. Now, there are three types of cards in the Pokemon trading card game. You have Pokemon cards, energy cards, and trainer cards. Today, we are going to be focusing on Pokemon cards because they are the most important for now. Now, here is a Pikachu card. You can see a few things about him. He is a basic Pokemon. We'll talk about what that means in a moment. He has 60 hit points, which means when 60 damage has been dealt, he will be knocked out. We can see that he is weak to fighting Pokemon. All that means is that fighting Pokemon, you double the amount of damage they would be doing. If it would do 30 damage to Pikachu, it does 60. And he has a resistance to metal. That means that if a metal Pokemon was going to do 30 damage, it would be reduced by 20 and the metal Pokemon would only do 10 damage due to the resistance. And you can see that he has two attacks. Now, these are where the energy cards come in. There are several different types of energy in the Pokemon trading card game. And you are allowed to attach one energy card per turn to any of your Pokemon. So, you see that this Pikachu can do 10 damage using Gnaw for one lightning energy. So, you attach one lightning energy to your Pikachu and you can do 10 damage. But he also has an attack for two colorless energy, which means you can use any energy you like. It could be a lightning and a lightning, or it could be a lightning and a fire, for instance. And there you can see it's very self-explanatory. You do 10 damage, but you also flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's defending Pokemon doesn't do anything to you next turn. Now, some of these rulings get very complicated. Most of them are written on the card, but as we're going to talk about, if you just go to tournaments and ask people who play, they will be able to deal with the more complicated stuff. We are keeping it nice and simple. Now, during a game of Pokemon, you will have an active Pokemon. That is the only one that is allowed to attack. And you will have up to 5 benched Pokemon. You may wish to change your active Pokemon for one of your benched Pokemon, so you are once per turn allowed to retreat your active Pokemon. And that's where the retreat cost comes in. Let's say I've got 1 energy on a Pikachu. Last turn I used Gnaw, but I don't want my Pikachu in the active anymore. I have to pay a retreat cost of 1 to get that Pikachu out of the active. That means I discard an energy card attached to Pikachu, and it goes into the discard pile. The discard pile is merely a pile of cards that you have used. So let's go through what happens at the beginning of a game. You have 2 players, each of whom has exactly 60 cards in their deck, which will be a combination of Pokemon, energy, and trainer cards. At the beginning of the game, you shuffle your deck and you draw exactly 7 cards. Now, we noticed earlier that Pikachu was a basic Pokemon. In order to start the game, you must have a basic Pokemon in your opening hand of 7 cards. If you have more than one, then you have a choice, but before you start the game, you must put one of your basic Pokemon that you got in your hand of 7 into the active position to start the game. If you have extra basic Pokemon other than the one you've put in the active, you may choose to put them on the bench and they will start the game on the bench. If you have no basic Pokemon, then you must show your opponent your hand to prove you're not lying. Lying is bad, kiddies. And then you shuffle up your deck again, you draw a new hand of 7, and you keep doing this until you get a basic Pokemon. We refer to this as a mulligan, and every time you take a mulligan, your opponent is allowed to draw 1 extra card before they start the game as a sort of punishment. You then take the top 6 cards of your deck and you lay them face down as your prize cards. Every time you knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon, that is, you do attacks enough time to take their HP down to 0, you may take one of your prize cards, and once you take all 6 prize cards, you win the game. Then all you need to do is flip a coin, and whoever wins the coin flip then gets to start the game and take the very first turn. And this is the basic layout of your side of the board as you play. Your opponent will have the exact same thing mirrored on his side, or her side. Let's not be sexist here. You have your active Pokemon in the active position. That is the only one that can attack, retreat, etc. You have a maximum of 5 bench Pokemon. Now you can attach energy, etc., as we'll talk about, but you cannot attack with them. They're on the bench. You then have your deck, from which you draw cards, either because it's the beginning of your turn or because you play a trainer card that allows you to do so. You have your discard pile, which is where you put cards that you have played, trainer cards that you've played, or energy that you've discarded to retreat, or Pokemon that have been KO'd. We will talk about trainer cards in depth in the next video. And then you will have up to 6 prize cards that you then take as you KO your opponent's Pokemon. During your turn, there are several things you can do. You must begin your turn by drawing a card. This is not optional. If you cannot draw a card at the beginning of your turn because your deck is out of cards, you lose the game. You then can do the following things. You may attach an energy to one of your Pokemon, either basic or benched, but only once per turn. You may, if there is room on your bench, if there are not 5 bench Pokemon already, you may put a new basic Pokemon on the bench, but basic only. Now, what you can do is you can evolve Pokemon that are already on the bench, but there are a couple of rules to follow. Firstly, you cannot evolve a Pokemon that was put into play that turn. The rule is very simple. If that Pokemon was in play at the start of your turn, you may evolve it only once. So if you've got a Pikachu, either in the active or on the bench, you may then play a Raichu during your turn to evolve that Pikachu if the Pikachu was on your bench at the start of your turn. Raichu is a Stage 1 Pokemon, which means it is the first evolution. Now there are Stage 2 Pokemon, and they follow the same rules. Let's say I start with an Oddish on my bench. I cannot evolve him because it is my first turn. On my second turn of the game, I then have had the Oddish down for a turn, so I am able to evolve into Gloom, but I cannot evolve again because Gloom wasn't there when I started my turn. I can then, on my third turn of the game, now that Gloom's been down for a turn, I can evolve all the way into Vileplume. I can, on my turn, if I wish, retreat my active Pokemon as long as it's only once per turn and I discard the right number of energy attached to that Pokemon. If my active Pokemon has got a retreat cost of 2, but there's only 1 energy attached, then in order to retreat, I will have to attach a second energy and discard them both. Some Pokemon, however, hey Raichu, do not have a retreat cost, so you can retreat them for free. The other thing you're able to do on your turn is to play trainer cards, but they are best dealt with in the next video. At the end of your turn, and only at the end of your turn, you may attack, or you can just pass, which is to say let your opponent have a turn without attacking. If you attack, this will end your turn, and then you do enough damage, hopefully to KO your opponent's Pokemon and take a prize card. So let's say, for argument's sake, I have got a Pikachu in the active and my opponent has a Lightning Weak Yveltal. I have got 1 energy on Pikachu. I use Gnaw for 10 damage because I've got the 1 lightning energy. Because Yveltal is weak to Pikachu, that damage is doubled to 20. It does not do enough. Yveltal takes 20 damage. And then it is my opponent's turn and Yveltal has 110 HP remaining. But let's say I have evolved my Pikachu to a Raichu. I then attach a second energy to Raichu, and let's say I have 5 Pokemon on my bench. Now, if we look at Raichu, we can see his attack does 20 damage for every benched Pokemon. I have 5 bench Pokemon, so I do 100 damage. But because Yveltal is weak to lightning, that is doubled to 200 damage, which is more than 130, so my opponent's Yveltal is KO'd and I take a prize. It should be noted, however, that if you go first, you're not allowed to attack on your very first turn of the game. If you go second, you can attack every turn. If you go first, you cannot attack on turn 1, but you can attack every turn thereafter. Now, the game carries on until you meet a win condition, and there are 3 win conditions. Number 1, you take your 6th prize card, you've knocked out 6 Pokemon, you win the game. Number 2, my opponent has no Pokemon remaining. I knock out my opponent's active Pokemon, but they have no bench Pokemon to put up in their place. Therefore, I win the game. If your active is KO'd, you can put up any of your bench Pokemon. It is your choice to be the new active Pokemon to start your turn. Thirdly, if my opponent cannot draw a card to start their turn, I win the game. And as a little side note about decks, other than basic energy, you can only have 4 of each named card in your deck. So you can have 4 Pikachus and 4 Raichus. You can have 2 of this Pikachu and 2 of this Pikachu, but you can only have 4 Pikachu in total. The only exception is basic energy. You can have as many basic energy in your deck as you like. Now that was a very basic introduction to the Pokemon trading card game. Hopefully it's shown you the basic mechanics of attaching energy, doing attacks, knocking out Pokemon and taking prizes. In the next video we are going to look at abilities, ancient traits, break evolutions, EXs and Mega EXs, status conditions, stadiums, supporters and item cards. But I think this is enough for an introduction. We'll come to that in the next video. I do hope you comment, I hope you like, and I hope you subscribe if you haven't done so. Thank you very much for watching this, and if you've got any questions, that's what the comment section is there for. This was your basic introduction. Hopefully you'll be back to learn some slightly more complicated things in our next video. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.